wanna grow up. I'm a ToysRUs kid. They got a million toys at ToysRUs that I can play with. I don't wanna grow up. I'm a ToysRUs kid.
If you grew up at any point during the 1950s to the 2000s, chances are you can relate to the feeling of pure joy and excitement when your parents said, "Hey, you want to go to Toys R Us?" For children of the last 6 decades, the major toy and game retailer was the place to beg your parents for a visit. Once inside, kids of all ages were greeted with what seemed like towering walls with coverage up and down and left and right, with nothing but bright colors popping out at you in the form of the latest and best toys that ever existed. At the height of their success, the toy chain employed more than 60,000 people, had locations on 5 continents, and were deemed by many analysts to be a category killer, and were seemingly to be the dominant force in the toy industry for decades to come. However, not all was so optimistic within the company, and those lofty predictions would prove very, very wrong. Today, we're going to discuss the rise and fall of the once great behemoth retailer, Toys R Us. If you're like me, Toys R Us is a staple memory of my childhood, and no one was more sad than me when my local store closed its doors, and at the time I didn't understand why. Chapter 1: History in the Making. In 1923, Charles Lazarus was born. In 1948, the story of Toys R Us begins in a rather unexpected fashion, as a baby furniture store called Children's Bargain Town. Here, Charles sold the latest strollers and baby cribs. Nothing mind-boggling, but very utilitarian. But it was here that Charles realized the habits of parents and their children. You see, as parents came in to shop the latest cribs and strollers, the kids were looking at stuffed animals. They quickly realized how boring and raggedy their old toys were when they came in and laid eyes on the newest and brightest toys in the store. Naturally, Charles was a man of action, and in 1957 opened his first toys-only store in Rockville, Maryland, to massive success at the height of the post-World War II baby boom. Charles Lazarus's timing could not have been more perfect. In 1966, after a decade of profit, the store was acquired by interstate department stores, and for literal decades the store sold massive amounts of toys and made loads of profit. They soon realized they needed a mascot to back the brand, and in 1969 came the announcement of their beloved mascot, Geoffrey the Giraffe, or Dr. G in his younger years. Geoffrey the Giraffe gave life to the brand and to the nation's children. Geoffrey stood proudly as an icon of imagination and a place where dreams came true. Then, in 1974, with 51 locations to their name, Interstate Department Stores was forced to file bankruptcy. Luckily, placing Charles Lazarus back in charge of the company, and he was able to right the ship and ended up taking Toys R Us public. What followed was a slew of success, dominating the toy industry in the 70s and 80s. The brand turned eye-popping revenues, seemingly at ease, with kids around the world making Toys R Us their go-to location for any and every toy indulgence. In 1984, the first Kids R Us, a new store that sold children's clothing, opened its doors, making the brand's first spin-off store a reality. Hey guys, before we get to the next part of the story, I just wanted to say that if you find these videos interesting, please consider turning on notifications for The Haas Official. I'm currently working on some even bigger projects right now, so if you want to make sure you see them when they're ready, just hit the notification bell right now. Also, I just want to say a massive thank you for watching this channel. These videos take a long time to make, and so honestly, I really appreciate all of your comments and support. So yeah, thank you for everything. And now, let's get back to the story. Chapter 2: The Beginning of the End. The 1990s seemed poised to be the largest decade yet for the big box retailer. However, instead, this decade would become the beginning of their downfall. In 1994, Lazarus stepped down as the CEO, the first sign of the company's demise. After he stepped away, the brand introduced its second spin-off, Babies R Us. With the new leadership team looking to further capitalize and repeat the success that they enjoyed thus far with Kids R Us. Unfortunately, that didn't happen as expected. As the 1990s continued on into the 2000s, the brand was faced with mounting issues, primarily the massive increase in competition from other companies such as Walmart and Target. Refusing to give up, Toys R Us marched ahead, continuing to operate as the dominant force in toys and games. In a confident display to the world, the brand opened the largest toy store in the world, located in the middle of Times Square in New York City. The footprint was so large that there was even a full-sized Ferris wheel inside the store. As you might expect, debts were piling up in the face of decreasing sales, and in 2004, the toy giant closed the doors of all Kids R Us locations to make up for their losses. In 2005, 3 equity firms had to step in to try and save them. Toys R Us sold for $6.6 billion and returned to a privately held company. This move seemed to be promising in the immediate future, with a focus shift to e-commerce. Toys R Us saw a boost to sales and a reemergence of the brand's dominance. By 2009, the brand had seen promising year-over-year revenues and had even acquired other toy retailers such as eToys.com, FAO Shorts, and KB Toys, a one-time chief rival to Toys R Us. However, this spending spree would prove to hardly even pay for shareholder dividends. Chapter 3: The Fall. From outside, it may have seemed like Toys R Us was flourishing again, much like its pinnacle of success of the 1970s and 80s. Even so, inside the company, sales were flatlining, and the huge debts of their new millennium acquisitions were proving to be tragic. By 2015, the company was floundering. E-commerce had become the standard in world commerce, and fewer people were visiting niche stores like Toys R Us, abandoning such brands for the likes of one-stop shops like Amazon. Time after time of failing CEOs with conditions vastly unchanged. Former Domino's Pizza CEO Dave Brandon stepped in late 2015 with a determined spirit to turn the company back to its former greatness. During an investigation under his leadership, it was discovered that vendors were misled about the company's ability to pay for merchandise, and that Toys R Us should have known that restructuring was doomed. Brandon was unsuccessful, and on May 14, 2018, he resigned as the CEO of Toys R Us, having earned $11.25 million in compensation with the company during the previous year. With Amazon, Target, and Walmart all crushing Toys R Us in the e-commerce space, they were forced to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the fall of 2017. Even so, the retailer still held over $5 billion in debt from 2005 that it could not pay off. In the year 2018, stores everywhere began to close their doors for good, and all e-commerce connections had been severed. By July of 2018, not one Toys R Us store was left standing, and the brand had seemingly perished. Chapter 4: Critical Mistakes. From the outside looking in, Toys R Us seemed to be a thriving behemoth in the world of toys and games. It was certainly the first choice to come to mind for many toy seekers. Through fun and sometimes wacky ad campaigns and massive packed stores, the brand was hiding some serious problems. The underlying issue for Toys R Us was a gargantuan level of debt that was simply unsustainable. They were also hampered by a constant change in leadership, with a new CEO being announced nearly every year. Outside of these internal issues, there were other problems looming that led to the brand's fall as well. The world had changed since Toys R Us was the industry leader, and people simply were not shopping in person anymore. The world of commerce was shifting in a major way to the online space, and competitors like Amazon, Walmart, and even Kmart had a massive financial and timely advantage, beating out any attempts by the brand to gain traction. There was also a major decline in the toy industry altogether, because digital products became more and more popular with kids of the new millennium. Ultimately, the cards were stacked against Toys R Us, and it stood no chance at overcoming the swarm of issues that it faced. Chapter 5: A Glimmer of Hope. If you and I are anything alike, The thought of a Toys R Us fills me with good memories and a rush of nostalgia. And if I dig deep down, the closure of the store did bring some sadness. But the truth is, not all hope is lost. In early 2019, True Kids Brands, a conglomerate that owns over 900 branded retail locations under various names throughout the world, purchased the rights to Toys R Us and Jeffrey, and they showed an interest in smart, scalable rebirth of the brand. During the holiday season of 2019, several holiday pop-up stores were announced, with a limited selection of the season's hottest toys and gadgets offered for sale. Even Amazon struck a deal with the new iteration of Toys R Us, having the brand list its links for their products directly on the new Toys R Us website. The new website also has a focus not only on products for sale, but also play ideas, lists of DIY activities and games that kids can make use of on a boring day. It would seem that the new Toys R Us is throwing everything at the wall and hoping something will keep them sticking around for years to come. The question is it sustainable? Can the brand that was once the undisputed king of toy sales regain its footing and return to retail relevance? The answer is yet to be determined. While 2019's rebirth was met with excitement from plenty of those familiar with the brand, the global pandemic in 2020 quickly put a pin in any immediate expectations, with supply chain issues still being worked out in late 2022. I, for one, am hopeful that this new identity of the brand is successful, and that one day I can walk into a Toys R Us store just like I did when I was a kid. Or maybe my own children can one day set foot in the toy wonderland and their imaginations can run wild. But seriously, I think every toy store needs a Ferris wheel. It surprises me how many of the companies and brands have such shocking histories. Honestly, I was quite surprised at their stories. So go check out these stories now and I'll meet you there. Thanks for watching.